Hi, thank you for inviting me to talk today. Today, I'm going to talk about a teaching tool that's incorporated into a 801 class. It's in the TEAL version of 801 and 802. And this was developed by Professor John Belcher. It had a lot of roots here at MIT in the Integrated Studies program developed by Arthur Steinberg at Experimental Study Group, had developed a lot of the pedagogical ideas. And then John worked on looking at other elements of studio physics to build our TEAL course, which has been going on for 15 years as an ongoing experiment. Today, by the way, one of the interesting things about Denny's talk is that we're now trying to incorporate that brushless motor into 802. Jacob White is leading a group, and so we're going to try to bring that into the TEAL classroom. In the spring, it's a little bit tricky because we have 740 students, which requires money and time. So it's nice to have these cooperative efforts. We're doing some cooperative efforts with Ian Hunter's mechanical engineering group to bring some of his sensors into the TEAL classroom. But today I want to just talk about a new tool that we've been using called Lightboard Videos. And we have a team that's been developing it. Dr. Tomasek, Dr. Rayan Deepto, Chakrabarty have been leading this. But really the person up on the right is super important, Jim Kane, because he built our Lightboard studio for us. And this is what it looks like. It's an incredibly simple thing. It's a pane of glass, basically, that you can write on. And with that pane of glass, we have a computer, a camera, and I'd like to show you some of the ways that we're incorporating this into a blended learning environment today. So the history of the Lightboard video was developed by Michael Peshkin just a couple of years ago. John Brissom, in a typical MIT exchange, he's walking down one alley and I'm walking the other alley, and he says, "Peter, Google Lightboard video, I'll build you one," as he's walking away from me. And I said, "What?" He said, Lightboard video, it's great, I'll build it. Actually, a number of other people put up the support, Sanjay and Ike, and a whole bunch of people have supported this effort. And then Jim Kane built this studio. It's in the basement of Building 26. And you can contact him if you're interested in actually reserving time there. Please don't, because you're taking our time away from us. It's gotten very popular, and it's and so I hear that more studios are going to be built around the campus, which is really exciting. And we started making these videos in 2005, and we first put them into our course in 2016. We built a full set of videos for 801. And now we made about 300 of these videos. I'll show you a few examples today. They're all very short, and they're integrated into our blending learning environment. Now we're starting the process of developing these videos for 802. And so let's just kind of look at what it looks like. So we have a lot of different uses. Today I just want to show you 3 short excerpts of uses and then highlight some other types of uses. And then in the session afterwards, if you want to look in more detail at how some of these things are being used, I'd be happy to show you longer versions of them. So let me go over here and just show you a few seconds. Now we'd like to discuss angular acceleration for circular motion. So, oops, hang on a second. Up there. Suppose we have our angle theta, radius r. Is that going to appear? R hat there we are. And theta hat. Recall that we described the angular velocity as the derivative of d theta dt, and we made this perpendicular to our right-handed coordinate system, direction k hat. Now let's differentiate that to get our concept of angular acceleration. So alpha is the second derivative d theta dt squared k hat. And this quantity is what we call angular acceleration. Well, hang on. Now, we'll describe the component. That's the first question that everybody asks. How do you draw left-handed and backwards? And it takes a lot of practice. It takes a year. The computer flips the image. So, but I'll tell you, the right-hand rule is really confusing. because you have to use your left hand, and what's into the board is out of the board. And if you notice there, I completely fudged it. And I just said K-hats like this. And what it taught me was why little things like the right-hand rule is so confusing to the students, because if you do it in a way that you've never used to, it's really hard. And now I can appreciate why students have difficulties with a lot of these ideas. It taught me a lot. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of writing on the board. I'm going to show you a few more examples. This topic was angular acceleration and angular velocity, which are two topics that are extremely difficult for students to grasp because they're very counterintuitive in terms of the vectorial quantities that are involved in them. So the next one, let's see. Yeah, this one is from Professor Friebel, Anna Friebel, and she is just describing an example problem.
The moment of inertia of a big wheel. Here we have a big wheel, and on the side it's attached here at the center, and there's a string going around here, and on that string is a little mass hanging. And our disk here has a radius r.
Now,
and we now want to know, in a little experiment.
Just giving you an example of just an introduction to these. Now, what students do is they immediately move it up to twice the speed because it's very slow like this. They look at this whenever they want. If they're solving a problem on this, they can review it. I think very few people actually look at it at the one speed. When I see them going at just the regular speed, it's very, very slow. But students can see this, they can stop it, they can review, they can go back, they can use it whenever they want. And also, it was actually a very interesting aspect of teacher training for new faculty members. They go into the Lightboard video room, they try something out, they see how it works, and if they go in the classroom, their confidence level goes way up, and that's a very important part. The next example that I want to show you is an example of using this for disseminating contemporary research information. This is Professor Vladan Vuletek, and he's giving this is just an excerpt from a long lecture on friction, which has a quantity that's not always very well explained in class. And Vladan's research group is doing a lot of work on this. So he's about to describe a model with a substrate and a spring, atoms above the substrate, oscillating above them. And I'll give you just a little bit of Vladan describing how the energy of this system works. So he's describing the potential of the substrate right there.
And how do we model the spring? Well, this is going to be the potential energy, V. How do we model the spring? Well, if spring has a linear force, the force is proportional to the displacement, which means the potential is quadratic in displacement. So this is the potential of a spring. This is what the spring does, and this is what the substrate does. And what we need to do is we need to add these two together. So what that means qualitatively is that the total potential of the system might look something like this. So as we now translate the spring across the surface with some velocity, then you can see that this addition between the fixed substrate potential, this one is fixed, and this spring potential is moving, you can see that this will lead to a time-varying potential for the object. So let's look now in a simulation what that time variation might look like. Okay, so what you see here is a combination of a spring and a periodic potential. And the periodic potential has been chosen a slightly different strength than I'm showing you here. It has been chosen weaker, so that instead of many minima in this total potential, there are only 2 minima. And what you see happening in the system is that as the particle is moving, the spring tries to pull it across a maximum of the periodic potential. At some point, the atom is released, and it releases energy that is taken up as heat by the substrate. And
okay, so what's interesting here is the opportunity to do simulations that you can put on these Lightboard videos. I think the important thing is video is a language that students are very comfortable with. If I want to find out how to do something, if I need to replace a lock on the door, I look on a video. It's now, the content is, I think, more important than the media. So if some students like text, they can use text. If they like video, they can use video. And I think what's interesting, there's a long history of physics videos. The Khan Academy has done many of these things before. What I like about this is there's a lot of nonverbal communication cues that are missed when someone is back to the wall and writing and looking over their shoulder at you. And so it's directly presented to the audience. So let me just go back and talk about some of those aspects. So the Lightboard video, the important point is that these are short. And they're embedded. We have a lot of them. They're 3 to 6 minutes. They're easily accessible by the students. They fit into the learner's schedule. They can look at them whenever they want. There's been studies about how people look at textbooks, and it seems like only before the exam are the texts looked at. And we're doing now studies comparing how students look at the text or the Lightboard videos in the class to see when they choose to use which media. I think the important thing is they're really inexpensive to produce. We go into the studio, Michelle and I are there for 2 hours, and we get about 10 5-minute videos. Then post-production enhancement, you saw that we can put on simulations into the videos. And I said before that the nonverbal communication cues are really crucial when a person is writing on the board and everybody sees where their eyes go and what their language and what they're looking at. That's important to engage the viewer. Now, the key thing about these, we're using them in an integrated fashion on our online part of our course. We use the MITx platform. And what we can do is we can structure the online blended learning part with video, with problem solving, with concept questions. And what it does is it frees up time in the classroom where we can now focus more on the learning and the activities that the students are doing. So I think that's a key part to this. It's clear that the major limitation is that it's non-interactive, but it would be exciting to use these videos and then to start maybe using Watson to introduce some type of tutorial element to them. And finally, we use these in a variety of different ways. I just want to summarize. We use them for derivations, conceptual introductions. We review class material, supplementary mathematical content, problem-solving methodologies, worked examples, hints, in-depth exploration like you saw in Vladim's video. And what's really interesting is we also, in the TEAL classroom, we have 8 faculty who are teaching in there. There's a lot of things that they've never taught before. And so we use these videos for teacher training. Faculty look at them before the class, and it gives them much more confidence when they go into the class when they're dealing with some difficult topics like gyroscopes. In the session afterwards, if you're interested, I can show you these videos in more detail. And as I said before, Jim Kane is the person who you can reserve time with. And I'm not sure if people can get the URLs for him or how to do that. OK, so that's just what I wanted to show you, this new tool.
Question verbally while Professor Sachs is getting ready?
Yeah.
So, when you're so you showed a demonstration of those post-production add-ons where you have diagrams and examples that are doing things. While the diagrams are doing something, can the person that's using the Lightroom thing see the diagram and
yeah, you know, you're looking, it's
them?
like a weather map, you know, on television. You have this glass in front of you, and behind the glass is a screen which is showing the actual video.
Okay.
And so you can project a PowerPoint onto that screen, and you can look through the glass and edit it.
Right.
So if you want to actually do it that way, you can. Sometimes we kind of cheat, and we imagine that the simulation is there, and I'm editing this blank plane of glass, and we do it in post-production.
Okay.
It's an incredibly flexible medium. It can be used for student to student talking. Every time we're in there, we can think of a different way that we're wanting to use it. So it's a very flexible, adaptable medium to any type of course, language course, physics, you name it. And by the way, your question, you asked the question before about different modes for students to learn.
Sure.
I think this is one of the ideas is that students can choose to use these videos if they want, when they want, and they can then, while they're doing other things, they have to process that information on their own. And I think that's, it's a plus. But if they had questions, then if we had a tutorial element, it would even be better.
Cool. Have you seen people use this in a kinesthetic setting? So if there's a dancer and they're doing some sort of like complex body movement, someone can actually like draw on the person that's doing the movement. This is the thing that.
Well, that's an interesting way. You'd have to get them in the studio to do it.
Sure. Yeah.
I need some PT therapy. I'd like to see them do it, and then I can review it at my leisure.
Sure.
Later on. I think it could be done. I mean, these are the ideas that would go into the new design of a studio. How, if people are a lot of different ways to use it, that comes into the architecture of the studio.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.